review for last year, and we'll have some historical data in here as well. And this presentation should look familiar. It follows the same guidelines as the previous presentations you've had before you. Moving along, so the overview is covering, it'll be alignment with the board priorities, department strategic goals, key performance metrics, significant accomplishments, and a look ahead. So the mission statement of fiscal services is to provide an efficient, cost-effective financial management system that facilitates sound financial planning and reporting while safeguarding the county's assets from loss, and to provide support services to other county departments. If you're unaware, the department structure is rather large, 6 divisions with 38 full-time positions, consisting of the accounting division, which has accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll and fixed assets, budgeting division, central services, purchasing, which includes fleet and fire commission, and risk management. The strategic alignment with the board priorities, you can see, you've seen these before. There's 5 of them: economic prosperity, high quality of life. Sorry. Excellent service delivery, inclusive participation, and effective communication. And this report will see how the fiscal services department aligns with those priorities. So we have 9 strategic goals. I'll go over them real quickly. So the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR, completed within the state of Michigan mandated time frames. Goal number 2 is provide accurate and timely vendor payments. Goal number 3, provide efficient payroll processing, meeting federal, state, and local guidelines. Goal number 4 is prepare and maintain operating and capital improvement budgets. Goal 5, provide cost-effective document management services to support county operations. Goal 6, provide effective and efficient preventative maintenance programs for our fleet. Provide effective and efficient purchasing processes is 7. 8 is minimize lost work days related to occupational illness or injuries. Last goal 9, minimize frequency and severity of insurance claims. Look at the key performance metrics that support the Kent County Strategic Plan. The first one is effectively coordinate the audit process with the ACFR development. And the objective is to complete the ACFR and the audit on time with a clean opinion. And I'm happy to report the audit process was completed on time under state statutes. It's almost 100% remote due to COVID, and that was the first time we had ever done that, and it actually worked out fairly well, so we're doing mostly again this year. The auditors issued us a clean opinion and stated that the county's books continue to improve and are in the best condition ever, which is a great achievement. And then we also were awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 20th time. So, item number 2 is to provide accurate and timely vendor payments. The goal or the objective is to have 99% of AP invoices issued on time without error. And you can see we processed just about 58,000 payments with on time without error, 99.47%. So a lot of payments very accurately. Next strategic plan goal is to provide efficient and accurate payroll services with the objective of 99.9% of payroll payments issued without errors. You can see we had 47,000 payroll payments, and we were slightly below the goal this year. There's COVID created some issues with some of the processing at times, but still overall very good, successful payroll processing. Next strategic plan goal is to provide efficient and accurate budget services. The objective is to have 99% of budget amendments processed within 2 business days. We processed 717 budget amendments, 99.99% on time. So we're above our objective there. The next strategic plan goal is to provide efficient document management services. The objective is 98% of print jobs completed by the requested due date. You can see we were above that objective as well. You will notice our print job numbers were down. However, we discovered during COVID that departments tended to lump a lot more things together, so the average ticket amount was higher, although the job ticket count was lower. So we expect to see that continue. Next plan goal is to encourage participation in county purchasing opportunities. The objective is to have 5 responses received on average per solicitation. You can see our solicitation numbers were down. However, our participation rate was up, which is good to see. We attribute the lower items due to they reduced the number of reverse auctions they did, which reduced the number of count. Good to see that our average solicitation number increased, however. Next plan goal is to provide effective, efficient vehicle maintenance program. The objective is to have 95% of county vehicles on a preventative maintenance schedule. You can see our number of county vehicles there, and we're meeting that objective. And you probably ask, why wouldn't we do 100%? Well, there's a few different specialized vehicles like motorcycles, snowmobiles, maybe some trailers that aren't on a preventative maintenance program. Assist with those, but they're not officially counted in the preventative maintenance program. The next goal is to reduce lost workdays due to occupational illness or injury. Reduction in lost workdays is the objective. And you can see our workers' comp claims. The number was pretty even. The actual days was a little bit down. A lot of the losses in 2020, lost work days were due to COVID exposure. So we count those as, if they can be proved that they happen on work, we count those as workers. Moving on to significant accomplishments. And we completed the audit, and the ACFR was completed on time and remote. We managed the CARES funding COVID response. If you recall, we received a lot of money. We were expected to get it out the door within about an 8-month time frame. They did extend that, but we managed to get about $80 million out the door through all the various programs that the board approved, including purchasings requiring a lot of PPE and the small business PPE program that was very successful at the beginning of COVID. So, maintain our AAA bond rating, and our budget is structurally balanced. Look ahead, this year we're upgrading our ERP system. We call it the financial management system. We should begin that in early February, and that will move us to the latest, greatest version of CGI Advantage. We hope to have some improved efficiencies, and we're going to install some additional modules that weren't installed as part of the first upgrade. The new fleet garage will be constructed, which will give us greater efficiencies there. We're also looking to reduce the number of paper checks, and then again we've got significant numbers, $127.6 million of COVID federal monies that are allotted to us, and I know the board's working on a plan to spend those. Thank you for the time, and now I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, so do we have some questions regarding his report? Commissioner Hennessy.
Thank you. We did not hear from the auditors this year. Will that be kicked up so we hear from the auditors as the report comes due next year?
Yeah, we had some scheduling difficulties. We rescheduled them, I think, 3 times, and then we eventually decided it just wasn't going to work out this year, but we'll get them back in the schedule, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner LeGrand.
Hi, I just wanted a little more detail on a couple of things. Can you explain what the print jobs are? You said that you talked about the document management. What exactly are you doing?
So if you're not aware, we have a whole central services department down in the corner of the building over here, and they provide all of the print services for Kent County and the department. So if anyone has a job like the clerks for printing, whatever departments may need. If you notice all the signs around the building for COVID, the stay 6 feet apart signs, all the door hangers and all that, that's all done in our central services department. And they've got equipment to do large banners for parks. So any kind of thing that requires printing is typically done at our central services office.
Okay, and that's under your bailiwick,
Yes.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And then I wondered if you could just give us a little more detail on the workers' comp situation. Is that just for employees who had COVID and were out for that reason, or are we talking, quarantine because of exposures?
All of that, plus any additional work duty injury. So not just COVID workers' comp claims, but any workers' comp claims, any injury while on work. So Sheriff typically has a lot of injuries when they're, dealing with suspects, that kind of thing. But anyone, the slip and fall at work, excuse me, could be under a workers' comp claim, so any of those types of work-related injuries.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. Wow, it's loud. I'm just curious, Jeff, do we anticipate this year any major impacts from either supply chain problems, we can't purchase things that are needed, or the just general inflation that's kind of hit us in the last couple of quarters?
I am concerned about inflation. They kept calling it transitory, but right now it seems like it's going to last a little longer than they originally think. Cal is here on the purchasing side. If he has any insight into the availability of supplies, if can let him speak.
Morning. So the answer is yes, definitely affected by supply chain issues every day, along with inflation. Areas that really affect us is in the construction, the facilities type is a concern. Every day we deal with it. As far as electronics is another one. Now, we did react on electronics and through Jeff and Marvin, we were able to purchase ahead and put in an inventory so our departments aren't affected as much. And there isn't a day almost that goes by that I don't get a call to request price increases and a lot of pressure there. So yes is the answer.
Thank you. Any other further questions for Jeff?
I could additionally, I know Al and their bidding projects right now, the larger capital, a lot of those are coming in above the anticipated budget.
All right. Well, seeing no further questions, thank you so much for your report today. And as you guys have seen, Kaylee just passed out the full report, so you can review that and pass along questions to the administration or to Jeff if you have any further need. So our next item on the agenda, item number 4, comes to us from Kent County Community Action. It's the temporary personnel to implement COVID emergency rental assistance program. You want to read the?
Action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to extend approval of up to 30 temporary staff to provide COVID emergency rental assistance Round 2, SARA 2 services to Kent County residents through the duration of the SARA 2 program. The SARA Round 1 and 2 grant programs assist eligible rental households having trouble making timely payments of rent and utilities due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Board of Commissioners Resolutions 325-2127, 325-2128, and 422-2138 authorize the county to enter into a subaward agreement with the Heart of West Michigan United Way to provide SARA Round 1 assistance, appropriate funding, and hire up to 30 temporary staff to provide the SARA Round 1 services. Board of Commissioners Resolution 0103-224 and 0103-226 extended the subaward agreement between the county and HWMUW from December 31, 2021 through September 30, 2022, and temporary staffing to continue serving applicants and extend fiscal services payment processing for SARA Round 1. HWMUW is requiring SARA Round 2 to be expended before expending the remaining SARA Round 1 funding. To continue providing the services for SARA Round 2, Kent County requests to extend the approval to use up to 30 temporary staff to assist residents to complete SARA Round 2 applications, review applications, and documentation to determine eligibility for assistance, communicate with applicants, landlords, and utility companies, and process payments to landlords and utilities. The temporary positions fill supervisor, community service assistant, community service clerk, and fiscal clerk roles for the program period of performance, January 1, 2022 through March 31, 2022. KCCA and community partners have processed approximately 10,453 applications for SARA Round 1 funding to assist residents with obtaining rental and additional household utility assistance. In 2021, a total of $27,842,190 was distributed in Kent County with an average of $5,723 per household. If funding is eliminated or decreased, The positions will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to the fiscal policy on grants, contracts, and donations.
All right, thank you, Al. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there support? Support. All right, any questions or comments regarding this? Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Breby. So Al, just a couple quick things. I see that this is round two. I don't see the problems of housing going to get any better. I think inflation will be around for a couple of years. I think the problems in housing will be around for at least a couple of years. Is there a plan from the government what we do after round two, or is it just going to end? And then the other thing is, if we're going to hire 30 people, where do we plan on finding those 30, seeing most companies can't find one or two?
Good questions. First one, I'm not aware of any continuation plan. I do know that, we are limited with what we can fund in the general fund as far as conferring an individual benefit. So in any event, to continue anything past this, it would require some sort of state or federal or special funding, foundation funding, that type of thing. As far as question two, I don't know where we're going to find 30 bodies, but maybe Jenny does.
We currently have temporary staff on board for this program who started back in March of last year when round one began. So we've actually been quite successful in retaining those and refilling when someone needs to move on. So we're all set at this time. But you're correct, this is a difficult time to hire.
Thank you.
Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if someone can explain to me, I'm just a little confused by two different end dates, one being March 31, which it looks like these positions are for, but then also extending through September 30. Does this mean we're going to have to approve this again if this program goes through September and these positions only go through March? What's the...
I think if there's funding left over at that point and the need is still there, we would need to renew it, but.
I'm sorry. This round two funding is a lesser amount, and we're expecting it to be fully expended by the end of March, thus the March date here. We still have some round one funds that we continue to spend down as well. We have the agreement through September for round one just in case, but I expect those will be spent well before then as well.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you. Al or someone, can you just, give us some basics about what is the eligibility that's required to receive this assistance?
The applicants need to show a connection between their financial difficulties and the pandemic. For example, losing a job. Also similar with their utilities, they need to show bills that they are back, they have missed utility and rental payments. There's a variety of documentation that they collect to show the financial strain on the household and their inability to pay in previous months. I could get you some more details on that if you'd like. I don't have all the details at my fingertips.
Okay, that'd be great.
Commissioner Hennessy.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Skaggs' question here, in that he's talking, the rental assistance, we have water assistance, other utility assistance. How do we coordinate all that? Is this one person answering the phone, one of these 30 people, then putting the people into whatever help and degree of help that they need? Is this a one application type process?
You're correct that we do have multiple programs to provide assistance with utility payments, SARE being just one. So the KCCA works with the temp staff assigned to this project to make sure we're spending down funds in the most strategic way possible. So depending on the eligibility for the different programs that we have funding for and the timing of when the funding is available or runs out, KCCA is just very strategic about what funds are spent when, and also in braiding funding sources. So if a person's needs are beyond what any one program is able to fund, they will braid funds from other sources to make sure the individual's needs are met.
Okay, so that's basically a yes, we're coordinating through a range of services and additional helps that might be essential to the people who are applying.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions regarding this item? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Our next item on the agenda, it comes to us from the Health Department. It's add one lead sanitarian position for expansion of the Ready by 5 Early Childhood Millage Services Lead Assessment Program. Al?
Action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to add one full-time lead sanitarian position. The Health Department has received funding from the Ready by 5 millage funds to expand the lead investigation work currently being done in the homes of children found to have elevated blood lead levels. $547,030 in funding has been made available for budget year 2022. An additional $582,720 will be made available for budget year 2023. The lead sanitarians will conduct risk assessments and lead investigations to referrals received from internal sources as well as community partners. Previous funding provided for 2 full-time sanitarians. The addition of a full-time sanitarian was requested in this funding cycle to support the increasing number of referrals received. The Health Department has proposed to add one full-time lead sanitarian position. The cost of salary and benefits for this position is $82,578. The grant funds will also support the existing staff of 2 full-time sanitarians, 1 full-time public health educator, 1 full-time clerk 2, and a .3 FTE of a supervising sanitarian, as well as travel, supplies, software, promotional items, and indirect costs. For 2021, the Health Department provided home health screenings, lead-based paint inspection and risk assessment services, and risk assessments to 84 homes. For 2022, the Health Department projects to service 144 homes, with the possibility of a home receiving multiple services. The grant period is January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2023. However, only the funding for budget year 2022 is being recommended at this time. The funding related to budget year 2023 will be recommended later this year. If funding is eliminated or decreased, the positions will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to the fiscal policy on grants, contracts, and donations. Assistant Corporate Counsel has reviewed and approved all documents as to form prior to signature.
Thank you, Al. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Wooden, is there support?
Support.
Commissioner Coleman. All right, so are there any questions at all? I see we have some guests from the Health Department. Commissioner Coleman.
Just want to make sure I understand so I guess a two-pronged question. The first being the 547 for this year, the 582 for next budget year. I think I understand that correctly, that that's coming from the early childhood millage tax dollars. And then secondarily, the sanitarian position for lead hazards is 82,000. So we're putting the full 550 into the health fund, but we're only allocating the 82,000, and the remainder will just be at the discretion of the health department?
We have Gail Brink and some of the guests from the Health Department here.
Good morning. Actually, the bullet point on there where it says the rest of the funding supports the other 2 lead sanitarians, the clerk position we have, the public health educator and the supervising sanitarian, as well as, the supplies, the travel promotion items. So all of those things, plus the addition of the 3rd sanitarian, equals the 547,000.
Can I follow up, Chair? So that 4th bullet, that does help for sure, those are existing positions,
Yes.
not new positions that have existing funding sources, but we're reallocating those elsewhere, or?
They are existing positions, and we had the millage funding for the last 2 years, so in 2020 and 2021, and it's a 2-year cycle. So this is the second funding of that cycle for 2022, 2023. So we are just continuing the work we're doing and then just adding additional services on top of that.
That helps a lot. So it's based on the millage funding cycle. This is a reapproval of those positions plus the lead sanitary.
Correct. I think
Got it.
the First Steps Kent was here early January for all the funding, and this funding was part of that approval.
That clears it up for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarification. Any other questions? Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Brevy. So my question's a little bit different. It's on the other end. So we've got this pile of money, ready by 5 millage funds, which I hear we could spend probably double that and still not get all the needs. What process do we go through that this is a priority within the millage, and how do other things fall? I mean, how's that decided?
I can't speak specifically to how the priorities of the millage funding goes. That would be something I think that the First Steps Kent people work with, I think, some county administration, and they review all the projects, and then those projects are brought to the board for approval. But how they prioritize what projects get funded, I can't speak to that. That would be done at the, the First Steps Kent and the review board that's in place.
Paul has some information on the
Yeah, I was
priority
going to say,
setting.
somebody,
Commissioner, that is actually reviewed by the Ready by 5 resident review panel, and that is one of the priorities that they actually have. So several commissioners actually sit on that as well.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Hennessy.
I'm not quite putting this together either. This request today is to support the salaries for the people who will be doing the work. Now, I assume that the money will be coming from other sources, so we actually can do something to help the 144 families that we assess the risks for.
that's correct. Like the city of Grand Rapids has some funding available for remediation. There's other financial resources. We help, once we determine that there's elevated, or there's lead in a home, we assist those residents with getting the resources they need to make the remediation and the abatement services. So those come from other state grant programs, and the city has some. Those are not part of this funding cycle here.
Okay, so Ready by 5 is funding the people who will be doing, the health education, the lead sanitarians for inspections,
Yep.
that type of thing. And then the actual work to help
To remediate.
to
and
remediate
right.
or to eliminate the
Right.
problem will
Right.
be done by other funding sources.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner LeGrand.
Chair, the remediation that we're talking about, is this a permanent remediation, or is it possible that this lead hazard could come back? Like, are we covering up lead paint, and then in 2 years, we might have this in the same home again?
Yeah, that's exactly true. Unless a house is completely gutted, you won't ever eliminate all the lead. So that is, sorry with the mask, but that is one of the, with a new position, that's one thing we really want to emphasize, is to go back after 2 years, after somebody has remediated their home. After 2 years, do another assessment to make sure that it continues to be lead-free, because it is possible that it could, again, have some lead issues.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions regarding this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, our next item, number 6 on the agenda, comes to us from the Sheriff's Office. It's a request to provide community policing officer at Plainfield Charter Township.
Action requested, recommend to the Board of Commissioners to enter into an agreement with Plainfield Charter Township to provide community policing services to add 1 new county road patrol officer position to appropriate $135,055 to the Sheriff's 2022 Special Project Fund budget and to authorize the board chair or designee to sign the agreements. The Sheriff Department would like to contract with Plainfield Charter Township to add a CPO position to provide community policing services. The community policing services will improve township safety by applying early intervention, security, and long-term problem-solving solutions for existing criminal and safety concerns, and using education, community resources, dialogue, and compromise to achieve solutions tailored to changing concerns and issues within the township. The cost for the position is $135,055 annually. That's $117,455 in wages and benefits, and $17,600 in vehicle, equipment, and operating costs. The $17,600 includes the annualized vehicle cost and assumes the purchase of a new vehicle and equipment once every 5 years. Pursuant to the agreement, the township will pay 100% of the wage and benefit costs, or $117,455, and $4,200 per year toward the cost of the vehicle. All other expenses in the amount of $13,400 annually, the remaining vehicle, equipment, and operating costs, will be absorbed by the sheriff's general fund budget. The applicable contract has been reviewed and approved as to form by corporate counsel. In the event funding is eliminated or decreased, the position will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to fiscal policy on grants, contracts, and donations.
Thanks, Al. Is there a motion? Moved and supported. All right. Any questions or comments regarding this item? Commissioner Wooden.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly appreciate, one comment, one question. My comment is I appreciate Plainfield Township's willingness to pay 100% of the wage and benefit costs. I'm wondering where the split between the vehicle costs is determined. Is that just part of the negotiation, or is it part of a larger policy?
It's part of a larger pattern of contracts would probably be a better way to put it. This is one of many contracts we have for a similar service, and this is equivalent to what others are paying in the contract. And I might add that Plainfield Township has an existing community police officer. This is an additional one that they're asking because of the expanded need they're seeing.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Breevy. I've got two questions, so I'll just state them both, and the questions will have to deal with this one and the following one, so I won't have to ask them again. So to the sheriff, when you add a position and there's costs that are absorbed by your general fund budget, if you add up, the two together, in the scheme of things, it's not substantial, but we keep saying that funding will be provided within the general budget. Now, do you have a part of your budget where you reserve for things like this, or is it coming from someplace else, and what is that someplace else that is losing funding?
So, and I would say, yeah, when you take them together, SRO is a different program with actually a cost-sharing formula that was established several years ago. So we can get to that part during that part of the conversation, which is next. But for community policing, there is obviously a part of our budget that is designated for general fund law enforcement services. That's the component of my budget that this would come from, the supplemental cost. And very clearly, probably the best example of that cost that we would see in our budget is the cost to supervise additional personnel. Because, one or two people added to a scheme doesn't show up as much as 7, 8, 9, 10 would show up in terms of needing to be supervised. And these positions are specifically out in the community. There is a little different flavor to each contract, so the supervision overhead is there. But without these contracts, the full cost of doing the law enforcement service is borne by the county. We have, there's a statute that requires us to respond to calls for service upon the county roadway where there are no other law enforcement entities, and we are the primary law enforcement entity in this community. So I definitely would tell you that the presence of this community police officer improves our availability to take other calls for service. It reduces emergency calls for service in this community, and in balance, I think is worth the additional cost that we bear as part of the general fund.
Thank you. And I wasn't questioning the benefit. I'm 100% behind it. I think the closer we are to the community, the better. I was just trying to figure out how the piles of money work, so. And then my second question is more HR, and this might be for Amy. So when we add positions to the county as a whole, I see these were presented in December. Is this, I mean, when it's a process for other departments, I know one recently this past year where we had to do like a study on whether the position's needed and other things like that. I mean, is it the same for the whole county, or is the sheriff's department, how that's done, different than the rest of the departments?
Speaking, positions that draw from the general fund, to the extent that it's possible for us to anticipate their need, plan for them all at the same time during the budget process, we try our best to do that. That's not always possible, and from time to time, as these positions come up, there's an individualized assessment of the need and a determination of the urgency, the draw from the general fund, the ability to pay, and the kind of strategic priority of the position. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis if it happens outside of budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. So the total cost is $135,055. And the part that comes out of the sheriff's general fund is $13,400. So that's about 90% to 10%. That's really nice. I like 90% to 10%. That sounds like a really good ratio. I also just want to thank the sheriff for, in the past, we haven't, I think, gotten this level of detail, but the documentation on the reason for having the position is extremely helpful and much appreciated.
Thank you. Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. You said there's an existing police officer in Plainfield. Are you referring to another sheriff in place under a similar contract?
Yeah, community police officer. There's
Okay.
actually a contract in place for generalized patrol services too, so I don't even know how many, honestly. It's probably 15 officers or so that are dedicated to patrol in Plainfield, and this is the additional community police officer. But to put it in perspective, Plainfield Township is the number of people of a normal city. So, and geographically, it's about 36 square miles. In fact, it's exactly 36 square miles, not about. So, it's a big space for us to cover, and this community police officer is going to help kind of balance some of those special events that we put on in Plainfield Township, and then hone in on some of the zoning things that really make enforcement in that community easier.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Commissioner Hennessy.
We ever get a look at the total cost, like Plainfield Township, what the total cost is to Plainfield Township and the total cost to us on an annual basis, what we're including in our budget?
Yes, that is pretty detailed out in the budget. There, the way the program is set up, the township patrol is isolated into a group of officers. So we have a designated staff that works all the township patrols, and then it's prorated for billing for each township depending on their hours or units of service. So we do have a pretty finite cost of how much each township pays towards policing, and we keep very specific track of it. If an officer is needed to be called in and used for overtime in a township to fulfill our commitment, then that's tracked separately in our payroll system. So although I don't have off the top of my head what the individual costs are, it is knowable.
Okay, or like the supervision costs or even the vehicle costs, that type of thing, is it all in one place in our budget? I guess I'm not familiar with that.
So supervision, there are some township resources that have specific, actually city resources that are part of this township pool that have supervision built in, which means that supervisor is dedicated to their unit, but most townships do not have supervision as part of their township patrol. So that would be borne in our general fund, and they are not individually supervising township officers. They are set up geographically in the county. So if I have two sergeants working at any given time, one would typically be North County, one would be South County, and so they would be supervising a blended of general fund resources and township resources. I would probably be able to estimate pretty closely the cost of supervision for township officers in general, but it's not normally done. We don't divide it that way.
Okay, thank you very much. It helps.
Great questions. Any further questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Brings us to our next item, again from the Sheriff's Office. It's a request to provide school resource officer at Kenwa Hills Public Schools.
Action requested, recommend to the Board of Commissioners to enter into an agreement with the Kennewa Hills Public School District to provide school resource officer, SRO, services to add one new county patrol officer, CPO position, and to appropriate $133,159 to the Sheriff's 2022 Special Project Fund budget, and to authorize the board chair or designee to sign the agreements. The Sheriff Department would like to contract with the Kennewa Hills Public School District to add a CPO position to provide SRO services. The SRO will improve school safety by investigating on and off-campus incidents that might affect the security of the school campus, staff, and students, applying early intervention, security, and long-term problem-solving solutions for existing criminal and safety concerns, and using education, community resources, dialogue, and compromise to achieve solutions tailored to changing concerns and issues within the school district. The cost for the position is $133,159 annually. That's $117,455 in wages and benefits and $17,600 in vehicle equipment and operating costs. The $17,600 includes the annualized vehicle cost and assumes the purchase of a new vehicle and equipment once every 5 years. Pursuant to the agreement, the school district will pay 70% of the wage and benefit costs, or $82,219, and $2,940 per year toward the cost of the vehicle. All other expenses in the amount of $48,000 annually, the remaining vehicle equipment and operating costs, will be absorbed by the Sheriff's General Fund budget. The applicable contract has been reviewed and approved as to form by Corporate Counsel. In the event funding is eliminated or decreased, the position will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to fiscal policy on grants, contracts, and donations.
Thank you, Al. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved and supported. All right. Any questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Burrow?
Yes, Sheriff, I'm just assuming the 70-30, typically I've seen with resource officers that within the summer months, you kind of relocate that officer, the deputy, to other parts of the community.
Well, I'd have to be 100% honest and say we tried to. But in fact, the demand for this population, service for this population really is significant enough to really take up most of the 80 hours a year that an officer has available. We do have a little unique circumstances with union contracts where they're allowed to comp time, but it is not uncommon for officers in this position to work 12-hour days. By the time they work during the school day, come back for events that happen over the school year, like athletics or circumstances that happen on the weekend. What we often find is when I try to use them for general fund functions in the summer, they've used up all of their hours. That being said, they do really substantially reduce the demand for primary patrol for that school district when there's a school resource officer present, and that's actually what we saw with Kennewa. Kennewa had a contract with us from 2014 up until last year. They decided for budget cuts and just kind of reorganizing how they were going to do calls for service within their school. They discontinued this contract and really have noticed the need for the contract, both in the level of safety within their school and orderliness within the school, but then also our demand for patrol services back out to Kennewa. So this is one of those contracts where everybody's very clear this is a very necessary contract to have in place.
Couple more, if you don't mind. All right, so ultimately, the 30% we're paying, we're definitely saving because I think it was 50-some incidents that I think I saw over the last year or something.
Right.
So we're definitely spending that 30% anyways.
And I also do want to say, 2014, when we initiated this program, the sheriff's department had 2 general fund law enforcement officers that were put into this program as kind of seed resources. So we lost 2 general fund deputies and then gained 14 SROs at that time to be dedicated to the school. So there was a compensation, a transition, let's say, for the general fund resources that were being used to commit those functions, and it got transitioned into a school resource officer program. I couldn't be happier we did it. It's been very, very effective, especially given the nature of schools and safety in schools. But there was originally a transition, and again, this is one of our original partners for that.
So if that deputy chose in the summer to work some hours, it'd just be overtime hours, correct?
Yes,
Is what it would be.
and they are mandated in for overtime hours. Sometimes we have a lot of special events in the summer or general patrol, so we do use them. It's just realistically, I can't tell you it's 30% of their time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I think Commissioner Burrow got to some of my questions, right? So it sounds, although we're in the time of year when last year might mean 2021 or it might mean 2020.
School year.
So, okay, so they've been without a school resource officer for a little over a year.
Yes.
And 55 calls, okay. Now, Commissioner Burrow made the assumption that those calls are more expensive than $48,000. Do you think that's
I think
the
that's
case?
accurate, yeah.
Okay. And, okay, so, lastly, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I think there's a fairness issue here. As I said under the previous item, 90-10 seems to me to be a fairly realistic and fair ratio of local money to county money. Obviously, citizens, including all the citizens that I represent that live in cities aren't in, as long as the school isn't in a township, are ineligible for this program, yet they're making some payments into the program. And I just would continue to encourage you to move towards a place that's similar to what we just saw in the last program, where we can get to some, I think, just basic fairness between delivered and taxes paid. Thank you.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Brevi. Sheriff, so my question is, in the second paragraph, it says, the SRO will improve school safety by investigating on and off campus incidents that might affect the security of the school, campus, staff, and students, which is really a broad definition. So I guess my question is, with everything that's going on in our country today and the past 2 years, what is the main priority of these officers, and when is it applicable that we would actually call in the sheriff department on a issue or a problem that has arisen?
That's a ginormous question.
I know.
So, honestly, it's better if we're involved in any safety-related decision or response for a school. And that involvement might be screening. It might be you talk to the officer, let them know that this has happened. We're going to reach out and talk to this child. We're going to be working with this family. So it's like a basic awareness level, all the way to include turning it completely over to the representative of the sheriff's office. And that's why it's really, really important to have that partner in the school who has the knowledge of the kids over a long term, knowledge of the staff that they're working with, perhaps the family from year over year over year, because it's easier to get to the court issue quicker when you have that familiarity, that relationship that's been built. When we try to do this with primary patrol services, it's really very much like you might have this officer today, that officer tomorrow, depending on who's in the area, the way our shifts work, because we're covering 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So it takes longer to get to what the core issue is when you're just being called off the street. Those officers are really intended to respond to emergencies. So back up to, maybe a threats complaint that really is somebody acting out in a way they normally have acted out, and it's easier for us to get to the point, well, did you mean this as a threat, or is this a suicidal comment, or is there a family issue that this is kind of acting out on, and we're able to kind of follow through and really vet that out. But our calls for threats, if you will, have quadrupled this fall compared to last fall. And if you compare it to 10 years ago, those numbers were barely on the radar. Those numbers were not, it was not normal for us to have to investigate fully school threats. So the environment has changed, the gravity of threats have changed, and the need for us to really vet them quickly has changed. Because if we don't look into it quickly and the school day is started without it being investigated, obviously that's catastrophic. But even it just waiting to be investigated really starts a ball rolling, because now they really can't have school safely until it's vetted. Now they're out of school, and then that gives other kids ideas. They understand that it's happening in their area, and it actually is contagious. They do it more often than copycat. So there's a lot of factors that cause us to really have to put a lot of focus on these investigations and ask to be involved. And I've met with the superintendents and the prosecutor to really emphasize the fact that we're your partners. We have to know about this. We have to work with your school district to get these vetted as soon as possible.
Well, thank you for that answer to that complicated question. And you made the remark that, 10 years ago, it was a lot different. And when I was a school board member, it was really a lot different. Going 10 years ahead now, but the role of policing in our community, are we going to be transitioning to more of in places specifically versus a central area where all the deputies work out of?
Yeah, I do think that familiarity, whether it's a school resource officer, community police officer, or your neighborhood patrol, lends itself to more effective police work. It's more complicated over big geographical areas, but what we really, and these are large schools that, we say you're going to be in and out of school, that you'll investigate these crimes or these issues, not necessarily crimes. We really focus as a sheriff's department of when there's a concentration of people, trying to have officers available, present among them, so that that contact happens very similar to how it would happen if they were walking the block in your neighborhood. We don't really have that ability to do in a sheriff's department, but we do have the ability to be where you are and to be where you're coming in connection to each other, and to do that in positive ways and when there's also a need.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Wooden.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to preface that, some of the statistics you've just shared really do show the benefit that this position would have. I just want to echo some of the comments of both Commissioner Skaggs and Commissioner Burrell. Thinking about the previous request that we just voted on, I have to assume that part of the reason that the CPO was authorized was also because there was an uptick in calls in Plainfield Township that was dragging on our general fund resources, just like the absence of the SRO led to an increase of calls being answered by our general fund supported deputies. And even though there is certainly going to be a net benefit by adding this position and having 70% of their wages and benefits coming from the Kenowa Hills School District, I still think that there's an importance in creating a more across-the-board approach to this. Even if we certainly decentralize the service delivery, I do think 10 years from now, as we're seeing the populations in these parts of our county continuing to grow and the demand for those services continuing to grow, a need for a more comprehensive funding strategy so we can ensure that these services are delivered effectively and are funded equitably across the districts and across the municipalities, not just cities and townships, but townships to one another and districts to one another. So we'll be voting for this, certainly see the benefit. I do wonder, is now the appropriate time to have a more thoughtful and comprehensive review of how we're funding these services before we reach a level of population growth where the current method and the current system is unmanageable?
Yeah, so, and I do think it's important that this is not always a slam dunk for us to just say, yep, let's just add that, move on, we'll ask the commission for it. We do evaluate these costs, we do evaluate our ability to sustain it, the improvement for the service that would be in that particular community. There are times we literally talk them out of things, like, no, you don't really need that. You need this instead, and those are delicate conversations often. So I take your note. It is something we do constantly evaluate, and then how do we get additional services to communities that don't have the resources to pay at the level that their demands are pulling us. So it's an ongoing conversation, and it's something I will consider.
All right, Commissioner Hennessy. Okay, Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. So at the beginning of this one, I was wondering, why the school districts had a better coupon code than the townships. But I think that's become a lot more clear. But to Commissioner Wooden's point, it is, I get a challenging dynamic, even just in the jurisdiction that you're responsible for, like year to year, the calls are going to be from different areas. And, so there's dynamics there. There's, Byron Township, population increase. Some of that cost should be borne by Byron Township. Things happening at the Tanger outlets, that's kind of a county-wide resource. Everybody,
Right.
comes down to that. So I get that there's lots of complexities. It is an interesting, dynamic, though, that, a school district could effectively say, well, for our budget, we're going to get rid of this and then force it onto your budget. That does seem like something we should think about. I don't know how we should go about that, but
And I don't mean to interrupt you. I think the really important concept, this is the starting point. These are our calls for service. This is our mission that we have to accomplish. So when we're bringing in a partner to do so, we're asking them to share a cost that is otherwise ours. I have to send people to these calls, and we have to have the resources to do so. So we do delicately walk through these contract conversations because of that factor. Because frankly, we always talk about these other departments out there, and it's a good concept to think of. If a small city were to close down tomorrow and say, we're not going to provide law enforcement services anymore, thank you, Sheriff, for coming to our calls is what has to happen. So you really want to make sure that we bake in a lot of value to the school above and beyond what our actual mission is, to really help the system in total and make sure that it's running more smoothly for their school, because there's value that goes to the school that is beyond what they would receive if they dial 911. Same thing with the community police officer. There's value that you're bringing. It's more than just what they're paying for. So it's a delicate conversation, though. And some townships, need more services and can't pay for it, and that's also a delicate conversation. But also beyond the contracts you guys see, we do a lot of special event work, which you never see that contract because it's not big enough individually to come in front of this board. But it's where we do have hourly rates to do special things, and we do leverage a lot of that with some of our townships who need specialized patrol during specific times a day. Tanger Outlets is a perfect example of that. They do pay for special services during times that, for the greater good, it's safer if we have more services there. So there's a lot more than what you just see from these contracts.
Thank you. All right, it looks like we have Commissioner LeGrand, and then I'll get to you, Commissioner Burrow.
Thank you, Chair. When would this officer start?
They would like for them to have already started. So
Immediately.
But rationally speaking, I will have to take an experienced officer and move them to this spot, because I can't put a brand-new officer in this spot. It does create a gap on my law enforcement services, more experienced officers going to both of these special roles. So I can't say it would start, I don't know when the Board of Commission meeting is, I believe it's next week. So it'd be as soon as we can reasonably pull the person off patrol without causing overtime on our patrol.
Okay, so I guess I have a couple questions. I had one reaction reading all of this request. It's very different to hear that this wasn't that they had an officer in place, did without it, and then is coming back. That is really changes for me the context of this this conversation. I know that nationally there have been complaints, there have been questions about what an officer, what the atmosphere that can create in a school. You're painting a different picture of that, but I guess I would ask you to speak on a couple of different questions. One is, you've been very persuasive and have been inspiring on the kind of training that mental health professionals and that sort of approach, and I assume that that's very important in this context, and I wonder if you can speak to that in terms of having a positive impact in the schools, but also your challenges with recruitment. Are these officers, is that part of your goal to, how are we focusing, how are we creating a kind of a positive impact in schools rather than, militarization is maybe extreme, but that, a negative sort of atmosphere in a school?
Sure. So let me start with the atmosphere in the school part of the question. You could do bad police work anywhere. You could do bad police work in a school. We really focus on good quality police work everywhere we are, to include the school. If you work really hard at relationship building and preventative contact, then the number of responses where there's a very significant safety issue diminishes. And so we try to make sure that we're putting the resources in the place that does the prevention. A school resource officer does that, and it's one of the best examples of it. That relationship building with the student creates a place where there might be a safe conversation for a student to say something to a law enforcement officer, to engage that officer and help problem solve, as opposed to taking care of business themselves and then having consequences for it. We've seen that over and over again, and it's hard to do that statistically, but anecdotally, I receive letters from students every semester about a school resource officer that reached them, made a difference in their life, improved their outlook. So it's touching, honestly, to read some of these letters. We do a program with teenagers, similar to our Shop with a Sheriff that we do every Christmas, but we do this in the summer right before school starts. And school resource officers bring young people that they've had contact with, and we go school clothes shopping with donated funds. And so you see that relationship that this school resource officer has created with a teenager, and a troubled teenager, and you just understand that contact makes a difference. And we see far fewer calls for service when there's a school resource officer present, which to me is an indicator that there's effective preventative care. But if that's not done well, it could not be done well at the school, not be done well at the neighborhood, not be done well when we respond to a priority call.
And sorry, just one quick question after that. If you do have, do you have negative feedback as well? You
No.
haven't? You haven't?
We
Okay.
haven't, no. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there might be an officer who doesn't make a parent pleased by what that officer is doing. I'd have to say usually it's the parent who maybe perceives that their student's been held accountable for something that they didn't do or shouldn't have been held accountable for. I have complaints like that, but I don't generally have complaints about the militaristic viewpoint. Officers are in a softer uniform when they're in the school, but they are definitely in uniform, and they carry a gun, and they drive a police car, and But that relationship development, I think, is pretty clear to parents after they've started.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, so we've had a lot of first questions. Now, if you have a second question, feel free to raise your hand. Commissioner Burrow?
Just maybe one question and then one comment. My experience with this within the Wyoming Police Department and even the Granville Police Department, having an officer at Granville High School, has always been positive. These are officers, deputies that you put in these positions that are relational people. I mean, they're not, these are not people that don't like kids, right? They're kid friendly. They want to be with them, and they form relationships. And again, it's been a great experience in my view and my experience. But with that relational, we want these students to feel comfortable with the officer, be able to tell the officer things, let them know what's going on in the school. So there's this trust factor. Kenowa Hills, a big school district. You're crossing Walker, you're crossing Alpine Township, and I'm not sure if there's another township in there as well. But so you're crossing multiple jurisdictions there. And this being a relational position, what about those elementary schools that are in the city of Walker? I'm assuming what's our game plan that we're just not reaching? Again, to me, it's relationally for the whole Kenowa Hill School District. How do we do that outside of, say, Alpine Township where these schools are located?
So, and actually, we have that circumstance in many of our school districts where we have SROs because of just the nature of jurisdictions. And we collaborate with the law enforcement entity that is closest, that might have feeder schools, if you will, the elementary that would be entirely in Walker. There's an Ottawa County element to part of it. We coordinate very closely with those departments, work in concert. It would be very normal to see our officer side by side with a Walker officer at an event for the school district. And I think that works best because there are a lot of things that happen outside of school that really had nothing to do with the school district, but impacted the student that's going to come back to school tomorrow with it. And so that communication is very important to know what's happening in Walker. And we share a dispatch center with all of these jurisdictions. So in general, we know about those things, and our officer will reach out to them, but they reach out to us if we don't reach out to them too. It works quite well as a collaboration. And I didn't answer one of your questions, Commissioner LeGrand, about recruitment, and you just brought this up, Commissioner, if I could. So we post these positions internally, and our officers can sign up to be interviewed for these positions, but the school district or the community that's hiring a community police officer, they interview the officers. So they'll see only eligible officers. They pick who among them, usually about 3, could be up to 5, they'll interview. So they decide based on how they connect with that officer and how they feel it will fit the needs of that community. And generally speaking, officers who sign up for these roles have a significant interest in doing this kind of work. It is a highly sought position at the sheriff's office. My only issue right now is I have so many people without experience at the department. We are running low on very experienced people, and you really need to know police work very well to do this very well. So that's our challenge with recruitment.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Skaggs?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I just want to, I think the answer to Commissioner Burrow has made this clear here, that in the request, under needs assessment, it says nearly every school district within Kent County, except for Kentwood and Kenowa Hills school districts, have invested in the Sheriff's Officer SRO program. What you mean there is nearly every school district within the sheriff's zone, right?
Well stated.
So, and then I would also encourage you to have those delicate conversations with the townships about, both with the townships and potentially with the school districts as well. Because it's really not that the townships can't pay for these officers. They can. They can, if they really want them, they can have a public safety millage, put it on the ballot, and see if their residents actually want this service or not, which is really just increased response time. They can become a charter township. There's many things that they can do instead of kicking this to us and having us subsidize them. So that's maybe a difficult conversation that's, a delicate conversation, that I think we should just continue to have here, especially as Commissioner Wooden and others have brought up. I think Commissioner Coleman as well. I mean, we are experiencing some significant population increases, and, this is not Virgins, this is not Grattan. These are, for all intents and purposes, have populations as big, many of them as big as any other, as cities throughout Michigan. And, I think that it's fair. I understand your desire to provide this service. I agree with that desire to provide this service for public safety. It's simply a question of, what's the fairest way to fund it. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have a quick one too. I'm a resident of Gaines Township, and we have the South Substation just about a mile or so from my house, and so there's a lot of activity. It's definitely one of the hot spots too in the county. And the township recently, the board approved a public safety assessment. We've had such an increase in growth, with Amazon and Switch. There's been so many more calls, whether it's fire or, police. So that's something that Gaines has done. And it's something that, maybe not every voter was pleased with, but it's, one way that they're addressing the increase in calls. And to have the officer in the schools and those relationships, I've seen them at different school events, and you can definitely tell there's some good, positive relationships being built. And I think moving forward, hopefully we can look back in 10 years and say that was something that really impacted our community, and that was a good thing we did. So, rather than saying, oh, so many more increased, threats and things like that, hopefully this is a good, move to address that for the future. So, any further questions? Commissioner Coleman.
Just, I guess a comment and a question, just out of curiosity, while I have the time here. My comment is, you mentioned a couple times, all of this really comes down to great police work, and just to publicly, say, I think our sheriff's department does great police work, and I have such high confidence in you and your whole department, and I think our community benefits greatly from that. The specific question is, inside the schools with the school resource officers, I'm just curious how this interfaces with mental health services. So, last month, Byron Center Public Schools expelled a student who the month before, brought a gun to the high school. That could have been a very serious situation. Thankfully, some of the students, saw it and said something, and I know we continue to encourage that. And in those situations, where maybe it's a lesser danger, or perceived lesser danger, but there's this sense that, the underlying, cause is mental health issues of some kind, how do these SROs interface with the mental health system in those situations?
And that's very complicated because it is very diverse throughout the county, what mental health services would even be available for a school district. That being said, each SRO works closely with the staff that is available at the school district, and they generally will have a response plan in place. And within that response plan, it identifies who contacts the mental health professionals, when they get contacted, how a referral is done within the school district. So the answer might be different in Byron than it is in Kennewa, than it is in Forest Hills. But if there are mental health professionals within the school, they will work closely with them to make sure that that referral happens through the school staff. If there isn't, then again, that officer has a broader context. They're law enforcement officers within the county. They could engage a number of resources, like the juvenile mobile crisis team that's available. They could engage that. They could work with the family to have the child seen at Network 180 or make other referrals. But it isn't always in the school district that we're dealing with.
Thank you. All right, any further questions? Seeing none, let's put this up for a vote. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, that brings us to one of the last items on our agenda. We have miscellaneous. Is there any commissioner miscellaneous? Commissioner Teal.
I just want to let everybody know that judicial resources will be starting about 5 minutes after we adjourn here. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Skaggs, do you have a question?
Oh, no.
No?
I was just wondering why we had so many elected.
All right, any further commissioner miscellaneous? Seeing none, our last item is adjournment, so I move to adjourn, and our next meeting will be February 8th in this room at 8:30 a.m. So we will see you then. Thanks for your time today.